my goodness, look at this old quilt. I am so excited to share this beauty with you in this episode of Lessons from an Old Quilt. This is my 71st episode of this. I've made 70 other videos on Lessons from an Old Quilt, showing you all kinds of old quilts, and I still have a ton of quilts to show, so stay tuned because this isn't going anywhere. This series will continue until I'm out of quilts, which I don't think will ever happen because I keep buying quilts. Anyway, this one is really incredible. I got this last summer from my parents. They picked it up at a rummage sale. It was a church rummage sale, and they paid $20 for it. They don't know any of the history. They did ask. They don't know who donated it. That's all we know. It's what we can figure out from the clues in this. Before we dig into this old quilt, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance. Thank you so much for joining me for this. If you're unfamiliar with Lessons from an Old Quilt, I take old quilts in my collection, usually. There's been a few that have been loaners, but most of them are in my collection. And I talk about what we as modern makers can learn from old quilts and bring that knowledge into our own practices. So let's dig into this one. So this quilt is an unusual quilt because it is different. It measures 50 by 69, sort of, kinda, because it's a lot smaller on the top than it is on the bottom. We'll get into that. I'll discuss why and exactly what may have happened. This is one of those that I have been researching, if I can talk, for a long time. I keep going back to it, thinking about doing it for an episode, and then I don't. Mostly because there are some unique features about this. There's also a section that is going to have to be repaired, which I'm going to talk about later in the video and how I'm going to do that. But first, just let's look at this beautiful quilt. This is a Trip Around the World quilt. It has 1,356 little tiny squares. They are each 1.5 inch finished, meaning after they're in the quilt, that's how much they measure or what they measure. It is a postage stamp quilt, sort of. Postage stamp quilts are the style of postage stamp quilts, and they don't have to be a trip around the world like this one, are usually an inch or less finished squares. This is 1.5 inches. We're gonna give it a pass. I'm gonna call this a postage stamp quilt. I know. It probably isn't technically, but hey, it's small. These little pieces are tiny, tiny. I'm dating this quilt to around the 1930s, 1940s. I could be wrong. There are a lot of clues that tell me it's in that direction. I'm not an expert in this field, by the way. I just love these and have done a lot of studying on them. I'm not an appraiser or anything like that. So I could easily be wrong. I'm not formally trained or anything. Keep that in mind. So let's take a closer look at this beauty and see what we can learn as modern makers from it. Oh my goodness, isn't this pretty? It's so beautiful. So let's talk about the trip around the world aspect of it. So you can see it starts with this middle, and then there are trips or rows or circles or whatever you want to call it going around. At first, I wasn't even going to research the construction, which was kind of stupid because I thought I knew how it was constructed. I was completely wrong, however. I first thought it was constructed like this. Let me turn it. That it was set on point after it was sewn together, so the rows were put together and then it was turned on point. That, however, I don't believe is the case. So after really looking at it and doing a deep dive and looking at other people's blogs and reading and researching about all of this, I come to realize that this was probably done in an English paper piecing method, and it was started here, and then the creator worked their way out around and around and around and kept building out. And you can see that we have some darker fabrics here and some lighter and the pastels, and we have solids and we have prints, which I absolutely love. It is so beautiful and so well done. Now, if you're going to be using this method of going in circular motion like this, doing layers or levels, or I don't know what you want to call it, I'm going to call them trips, outward, you're going to get a big rectangle. However, this maker or someone in this quilt's history added more pieces to the top and bottom. So the rows should stop here, but the maker decided to add some more rows. These pieces don't go all the way around, as you can see. And the same is true over on this end. We see the same thing. However, on the other end, and I should have started with that, or ended with that, I guess, we can see that there was a mistake made. Where is it? Here. where the maker added an extra block here. And then it kind of got wonky from there. There was definitely something that got mixed up in this area, and I think that's why the size is kind of thrown off. This quilt does not hang straight. You can see that here in this picture. It is very wavy. There is something with the sizing off, and that's what I've identified as the issue. Now, of course, these little squares could be slightly off, and then that adds up and adds up and adds up. But I do think that part of the, I don't want to say problem, because it's really not a problem, but part of the issue, I guess, even that sounds negative, is that these were added, these borders or extra pieces were added, and the maker maybe just got a little confused and got a little off, which can happen. It can happen to any of us. It has happened. And what's interesting about this is I know myself, and if that would have happened and I was totally off somehow, I probably would have thrown it into the closet and it would have been a UFO. Of course, it's different times. They wouldn't have done that maybe. I don't know if they had UFOs then. Do you think they had UFOs? Probably not. They probably wanted to get everything finished that they started. This is all to say that it's interesting that it has those extra pieces and extra rows. I'm sure it was to make it bigger. All right, let's talk about the fabric, then we'll talk about how it's appliqued down. So we do see this mix of different prints, but what's interesting is that even on the bigger trips around, the fabric is the same, and this took a lot of fabric. A lot of times what I see in these quilts, and I have a couple of these, is that they'll use the same color fabric and they'll end up just matching it as best as possible. For this one, the fabrics are all the same in every trip or every round. Now we do see this black, white, and red, which kind of started making me think it was more 1940s, but then when I was doing some research, I saw that it was in the 20s too, and you know, sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint this, so I'm not sure, but it definitely gives you a different look, and I'm not sure if I love it. It adds interest, but it is a very different look to the rest of these pastel-y, or I don't know, feel of this quilt. We also see this one, and this is where we get into some repairs maybe needing to be made. This particular fabric that goes all the way around is completely worn, and I did decide to repair it. It's 77 of these little guys that I'm gonna have to do, however, and I was trying to decide on fabrics. This was probably a brown. It looks like a brown now. I didn't love the brown. I pulled one of my vintage fabrics and tried it, and I'm like, oh, I can't do it. I can't. And I had a bunch of different vintage fabrics to choose from, but I don't know. I can't put this brown in here. I know it probably should go in there, but I'm not going to. So I think I'm gonna go with this green. I also thought about this blue, but I feel like it doesn't have the same feel. I think this blue that I have is a reproduction, and it's from the 80s. Which might be why it's throwing it off a little bit. This one is a old feed sack that I have, and I do have enough to repair all of these. So what I'll do, I just fold it under the edges, and all I'm gonna do is applique that down. I think I am gonna go with the green. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. The brown, I can't do it. And there are some other choices. Maybe I'll look at a few other ones, but I don't know. Anyway, this definitely needs to be repaired. I wanna keep going with this and make sure that everything is sewn down and intact so we can give it a little bit of a longer life than it may have had otherwise. This is one of the condition issues. There's other issues, like there's some fading, of course, and then on the back, which I'll show you next, there is some stains that we'll look at. Oh, but before we do that, I do want to talk about these borders. So we can see that the borders is a muslin. It's kind of rough. I think it might be a feed sack fabric, but I'm not sure. These are appliqued down onto this, and then it's quilted. And the quilting lines are teeny tiny, and they just follow the blocks. We'll see that better. Hopefully you can see it better on the back. So that's really interesting. We'll also talk about that binding, I promise. All right, let's turn it over so you can see. The backing is the same fabric as the borders or whatever it was appliqued down to. It is pieced in some nice sized chunks of fabric, but you can see all of the damage. Now I have washed this quilt, tried to get these stains out. I used all the stuff that you can use on old quilts to get that out, and it's still here. So I think it's part of its history, and that's okay. That's the way it's gonna have to be. I do know the quilt is clean, and that's what's important, and it smells good, and I can cuddle up with it, and that's even more important. So you can see the wonderful quilting lines here. We're seeing fabric shadowed through. There's some bleeding with the fabric. This pink bled through. Not a big deal. I'm here for all of these little imperfections that we see, because really it's just part of the story of the quilt. Okay, so this binding is so pretty. It is done by hand. I don't believe it's biased. Well, maybe it is. Has a little bit of stretch. It's in remarkable shape. It could have been added later, or it just stayed in really good shape. It's unusual to see that, however. Usually bindings are coming off. Bias is going to give you a little bit more of a life because it does have that stretch, and because of this curve, it could be from that. But the curve's a little wonky. That's okay. It was an odd size. Remember, it had a larger bottom and a smaller top, like many of us, and it has some character to it. But this pink, this bright bubblegum pink, is so perfect for this quilt, in my opinion. So whomever put it on, it's perfect. It just sets this off. It gives you a nice frame. The curve gives you a softened feel with all of these squares. So we have the angles and then we have the curve. It's perfect. It's perfect, in my opinion, for this quilt. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. And I'm sitting here looking at this right now, and I just saw something that I didn't notice. And I can't believe that, because honestly, I've been studying this quilt for a long time. But there's one fabric I just looked over. Look at that. You know how I said the fabrics were the same? There's this guy. He's not the same as that. So the maker must have ran out of this one. I love that. Oh my gosh. And I hadn't noticed before. Now I'm gonna have to go back and look again. This quilt is so beautiful. Let's talk about what we can learn from this beauty. The first thing I want to say is there's so many ways to make a quilt. So that's the first lesson we can learn. I had in my mind that it was built one way, and it was totally not built that way. And the reason I know that is because you can see that there are the pieces that are exposed from the damage. They are turned under, and that tells me it was a English paper piecing method, which I love. It just goes to show that there are many ways to do this. There are many different techniques, and as quilters, we have to keep that in mind. The second thing is adding those prints with the solids. And I've talked about this before. I always get to the point that I'm like, should I repeat lessons? But this one I think is worth repeating, especially with the binding being a solid. And you can see that here, that the solids and the prints and then the mix of different prints, all of it goes. It works. It gives your eye a little bit of a place to rest, but it also adds interest. And speaking of adding interest, the third thing that we can learn is adding those unexpected fabrics. Now, it's not something I'm a super big fan of. Admittedly, I don't care for this black, but it could have been what they had. And I realized that here as modern makers, we have so many options and they did not. So maybe this is what the maker had. That's fine. And adding that black, but we could do that still. We could add something unexpected into our quilt, especially now that we have all of the wonderful options out there. Now on my blog, I have other lessons that you can learn. I have a whole bunch of pictures that you can look at. There's close-ups, all of this stuff, so check it out, because I think it's just super interesting that you can go back and even look at this, gain some inspiration, see what you see, let me know what you're seeing that I'm not seeing, because obviously I miss things. And let me know what you've learned from this amazing quilt. If you like this video, please give me that thumbs up, and yeah, and subscribe to my channel to see more. I have tons of more quilts coming up. I'll give you a little sneak peek. These are some quilts drying on the line at my parents' house that I recently got at an auction. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you take some time to sew, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.